flu release to create fear, to kind of nip in the bud the revolution that was online to overthrow the government by this summer. Well, the problem is they're certainly using it for that. The problem here, though, is that this is 3 different flus, bird, pig, human mixed, from all over the world. It always comes out of Asia. And there's 2 different flu seasons in the world, their season and our season. It always comes from there, always. Now it's appeared in Mexico. The reports we're getting, and it's been confirmed by BBC and others, is there's a lot more deaths than they're saying, a lot more illnesses than they're saying. But flu does that. Kills 15,000 plus Americans every year and tens of thousands of Mexicans because they have less health care, even though there's less people down there. 100 million per capita, but more die down there. Of their 100 million people, more than 15,000 die per year. You can pull up those numbers. But why are they hyping it so much then? I want to get Steve Quayle's take on this. Steve, you've got the floor. Break it down with your years of researching this, your sources, what you think's going on here.
Well, first of all, the 1918 Spanish flu virus was cultivated by cadavers when specific teams from Fort Detrick and other countries went to areas where the cadavers or the corpses would have been preserved. Now, Alex, I was the first guy, I'm only saying this to put things into perspective, to state that the reason this is being cultivated is to be integrated into a biological cocktail that would be released at a later date. Do you remember that? I said that on George Norrie. I said that on... No,
you've been saying that for over a decade everywhere.
Yes. So the point is that based on my information, listen, what most people don't understand is that the biological weapons now are race-specific, and I want to cover this. I don't know if you've already covered this, but about a decade ago, one of the most famous bioengineer scientists was arrested in South Africa who was working on race-specific gene-markered bioweapons. In other words, if they want to target whites, they can target whites. They want to target blacks, they can target blacks, Latinos, Mexicans, you name it.
And HIV has been reverse-engineered. That's why it's hundreds of times more deadly to blacks, especially because they have the coupler points for it to plug in on, and pure Northern Europeans do not even have it. That's why they've got studies in BBC just a few months ago about Italians, Southern Italians that have had a big African influx over the past few thousand years. Southern Italians are very susceptible to HIV, but Northern Italians, which are really Austrians basically, can't get it.
Absolutely. Now, here's what I want people to understand. Understand this, that you're going to be sent on a massive amount of mixed signals. Number one, it isn't genetically altered. Yes, it is. Nothing in nature has this. Now, Alex, this specific strain and the strain that will come thereafter and the mutant variations in between, imagine having tentacles on the ends of the genes that are basically able to grab any form of mutating viruses and or bacteria. This is how evil and sinister this is. And I think that people had better understand that this is not a trial run. This is the initiating run for the big run. We know this, and I got to touch on this because you need to hear this. On Saturday, when you were doing your emergency broadcast, the entire command and control for martial law goes up in an airborne command structure. They ordered...
That's the 5 doomsday planes, which they now admit were activated. They told folks Sunday morning and admitted they initiated the martial law control grid under the executive orders. Go ahead.
Absolutely. But what you don't know is that, well, you were on the air, the order went out to literally every single military let's say, asset that was on HF, high frequency, was told to get off. At the same time, every state's emergency communications network was activated. So when people think, Alex, that this is just a bunch of brouhaha that has no relevance, that's how serious it was. You need to understand that what was going on Saturday night was the entire command and control structure ready to go at a moment's notice. Alex, what I'm concerned about first and foremost is this. No one has done more investigation in the public sector with the assets that are available than I have in the genetically altered modification of viruses. From the time Mad Cow first broke out, I said, listen, this is going to be used as a bioweapon prior to it being released in Great Britain. I said, when you've got guys down in New Guinea checking out the headhunters for the disease called Kuru, I said, you can bet your bottom line somebody's developed a bioweapon. The thing that concerns me the most is the art and antiquities guy in Mexico that died 12 hours later after shaking Barack Obama's hand. The fact that we don't know the expedient nature of his death or how long he may have been exposed prior to dying is telltale to me. Again, ladies and gentlemen, 10 years ago, I wrote the book Breathe No Evil. And Alex, given the 96 report, given what's going on, given everything that's taking place, this is the traditional shot fired across the good ship Lollipop USA, and people had better get serious. Now, here's something I think everybody's got to consider. If this is a specific race or a race-specific or a genetically marked targeted group of people, a friend of mine, Doug McIntosh, just sent me an email saying, Steve, Cinco de Mayo is coming up, and if it is the race-specific bioweapon, then remember this, Alex, all you would need is people who to gather in large groups across the country who are specifically susceptible to this form of genetically altered virus, and the rest is going to be history. And listen, Alex, it's not you and I making up these numbers, 30 million, 40 million, 50 million. Ladies and gentlemen, what has been done is to supercharge three of the most virulent pathogens that have ever been genetically tweaked in the history of this world. This is absolutely no exaggeration that this thing is being put forth in its initial phase as the initiating trigger to whatever else is out there. I want to tell you something about chemtrails. They can poo-poo everything they want to poo-poo about it. But when chemtrails started having genetic binders incorporated into the barium and all the aluminum and everything else that they were spraying, the point that was obvious is that at some point, let's consider that a primary to a binary weapon, at some point when the chemtrails change, then the susceptibility of the systems, the human immune system that's been worn down by the initial chemtrail, can be activated. That's one point. Number
that's
two,
what you and others have always said. Is the what's the weapon system called where they give you half of it and then later give you the other half?
Well, it's a binary.
Yeah.
And so here's what's critical, too, in people understanding this. You can literally take the CDC's reports and go back to when the chemtrail spraying started, following it through to when all the reports of how many respiratory diseases, and I'm getting every day, with no exaggeration, 20, 30, 40 emails of people that are coming down with respiratory crud. Now, I think that this is
Well, that's
critical.
what this flu does, is it causes people to die, just like the 1918 swine flu or bird flu that killed so many.
Right.
Spanish flu, if I got the name right. That one hit the respiratory system.
Absolutely, but what is interesting to people is not only do they, when you're engineering a biological weapon, you absolutely, at the same time you are designing the weapon, you're designing the antidote or the vaccine, okay? The anti-weapon, whichever way it's going. If it's chemical warfare, it's an antidote. If it's biological, it's a vaccine. The thing that's telling to me in this whole thing, Alex, is the fact that the rapidity that it's spreading throughout the world. Now, I believe the Illuminati, the New World Order crowd, always gives their signals, okay? And one of the signals is there are 751 flights out of Mexico City a day to points around the world. That's the number 13. The first announcement coming out of New Zealand was that there were 13 people infected. If everybody knows their history of biological warfare, especially under the Second World War in Japan, you're dealing with Dr. Ishii and Unit 731, which some people said was more accurately called 751. Now, if you understand, too, the history of Mexico City and the whole Aztec Empire and everything, you've got to understand that there is a severe occult symbolism of meeting at the pyramids, of meeting at the key pyramid where more people were slain in a day than some armies were slain in a year of fighting in the world.
And listen, this is very esoteric, but I knew you would bring this up because I was already thinking this, and we're on the same track. You know, when I talk about weather weapons, seismic weapons, people would laugh, but it's now been declassified, just not the details. Here is the news transcript, U.S. Department of Defense. If you Google DOD briefing, Secretary of Defense S. Cohen, earthquake weapons, it comes up, and here's the transcript of it, 1997. It's on screen right now. Let me... He goes on to see Alvin Toffler has written about this in terms of some scientists in their laboratories devise certain types of pathogens that would be ethnic specific, so they could just eliminate certain ethnic groups and races, and others are designing some sort of engineering some sort of insects that can destroy specific crops. Others are engaging engaging even in a eco type of terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. And this is what Dick Cheney then says in the September 20th, 2000 Rebuilding America's Defenses. We want to legitimize the use of race-specific bioweapons. You have a 6.0. They haven't had one of those in years. And it's right on Mexico City, right as all this is happening. And you're right. This is a satanic center. The elites are this is all just getting too weird, Steve.
Well, can I tell you this, Alex? And I know that there are certain things that, you know, we're trying to cover, but the esoteric nature of it is the very spirit behind everything you've written about, Alex, everything you've broadcast about. Though people see the literal nuts and bolts of how it's being implemented, when these individuals are meeting at the pyramid,